We get more revelations about the past, the start of a whole new war, and what might be the easiest fight win in One Piece history. Dr. Vegapunk truly is the no-punch man. How did the old scientist pull that off? Well, let's get to it. We start chapter 1067 with the members of Luffy's group having safely returned to the ground, and Bonney is already yelling at the kooky old man. Specifically, she's asking about his head. In the past, as we saw in the last chapter, it was ridiculously tall. Vegapunk has a surprisingly simple explanation. It was getting a bit too unwieldy, so he just cut it down to size. Bonney sputters that it can't be that simple to destroy most of your brain. They are not talking about getting a new haircut here. Vegapunk muses that when he had met Bonney, he was about as tall as a giant thanks to his large cranium. Jinbei is taken aback by that. He had heard the great scientist's head was big, but that big? But Bonney confirms it. The old man's bonds had been like a giant balloon when she had met him. Vegapunk finally explains himself, though he has some difficulty going over these specific terms thanks to his oversized tongue. As it turns out, he too is a devil fruit user. Specifically, he ate the hilarious sounding Nomi Nomi no Mi, or brain fruit. This paramecia type is perfectly tailored for a scientific genius. Thanks to it, Vegapunk is able to memorize an unlimited amount of information, recalling everything perfectly. The more he learns, the more his brain grows to contain it all. Vegapunk is extremely proud of his fruit ability, boasting to the group that he now has the largest brain in the world. Luffy notes the contradiction in that. Vegapunk's brain is now significantly smaller than when Bonney last saw it. He wonders if the doctor put it somewhere. In his shoes, maybe. Chopper doesn't have time to register that cynicism, however. The little reindeer has become overcome by immediate hero worship. He asks Vegapunk if he's got tons of medical knowledge, which the old man immediately affirms. Chopper looks like he's about to faint from the excitement. He's got to be hyped about the idea of learning from a super doctor. However, much more skeptical is Luffy, who gets blunt. He straight up asks Vegapunk if he's an idiot now that he has cut most of his brain out. That gets an angry glare from the doctor, though his tongue hanging out of his mouth undercuts that a bit. I mean, just imagine being called an idiot by someone like Luffy. Still, Vegapunk does not let Luffy's rudeness stop him from showing off. He boasts that the half apple atop his head is actually an antenna, linking him to the rest of his brain. He gestures up above them to the sky layer and the massive punk record sign. Behind that is the hangar in which Vegapunk keeps the rest of his brain, presumably in some kind of jar or life support device. Even this far away from it, the old man can still pick up on his mental activity thanks to the apple antenna. Even his body is basically a satellite now. This is where Vegapunk gets specific, finally getting into the issue of the other Vegapunks. He reminds Luffy of his encounter with Punk Atlas not too long ago. Vegapunk describes her as his clone, to the great shock of Luffy, who wants to know if this makes the old man a ninja. Vegapunk does not dignify that idea with a response, just going into more depth about the other 6 punks. Each one, according to Vegapunk, is a facet of himself and an expert in their field of study. He is proud of the set, boasting that because they provide such different perspectives, they provide much more valuable experience. But what's interesting is that the other clones are not operating with the Apple antenna. They have to sync up with the Punk records once per day. This suggests that there is a bit more to this process than Vegapunk is letting on. If they were just additional Vegapunks, they could be linked up to the main brain continually. Are these 6 truly just clones or more like Vegapunk's assistants / family? Luffy seems skeptical of Vegapunk's explanation, though he doesn't quite question it. Jinbei too appears unsure, admitting that he is having difficulty wrapping his head around this idea. Multiple people sharing one brain is quite odd. Vegapunk tries to explain by comparing his brain to a library. The punks are individuals who can access the same memories and knowledge base. Talking about it gets the good doctor excited enough to start speculating. He imagines a future where everyone could connect to Punk records. All of humanity would have access to his accumulated knowledge and be able to share their own. And with this, Vegapunk starts sounding like a supervillain boasting about his plan for world domination. You can see what he's going for, granting everyone the skills and knowledge he has spent a lifetime accumulating, but all of humanity would share one mind. Yeah, that doesn't sound like a utopia to me. It almost sounds like some kind of alien takeover, though there is a somewhat more innocent way of looking at it. This would basically give the One Piece world its own version of the internet. Vegapedia begins now. Chopper isn't seeing the downside though. The prospect of getting to study medicine with people from all over the world has the crew's doctor beaming with joy. Vegapunk could have made a better impression on the little guy if he tried. Flaring his new boots, Chopper jets off in joy at the prospect of everything he still has to learn. Jinbei, however, is keeping his feet on the ground, literally and metaphorically. Even though he has more information now, the helmsman is still unsure about this prospect, wondering how such a universal sharing of information would work. With everyone uploading their own information on Punk records, wouldn't their biases create an inherent conflict? People don't agree on everything. I mean, even the other Vegapunks don't agree on everything. Dr. Vegapunk commends Jinbei for his sharp thinking, but writes that idea off as unimportant. It's good thinking, but science cannot be held back by little details like that. It's interesting that the Doctor hasn't considered what discrepancies these 6 Vegapunks might create. They were all supposed to be facets of his personality, but they are all so different. Lilith and Shaka in particular are bickering almost constantly. His Punk record's already less stable than it looks. Regardless, Vegapunk's dismissal of the risks finally rips Bonney's last nerve to shreds. She is not in the mood to hear Vegapunk talk about the need for scientific progress, given what he did to her father in the name of creating the perfect soldier. The supernova pulls the beam sword from her pocket, igniting it with the press of a button, and in an instant, has the energy blade against Vegapunk's neck. The old man's eyes go wide with surprise at this show of hostility. He really is pretty oblivious given Bonney's attitude ever since they met. This wasn't hard to see coming. Vegapunk pleads with the supernova to stop, crying out that the beam saber is defective. Bonney doesn't bite on the idea for a second. The old man is obviously bluffing. After all, she tested the thing out earlier, and so she is fully aware of how well it can cut. Bonney has him dead to rights, and she has a demand to make. She wants Vegapunk to restore Kuma to normal. If he doesn't, well, the threat of holding a sword to someone's throat is pretty clear. Jinbei and Chopper plead with Bonney not to kill the Doctor, pointing out that doing so will make her tons of enemies. It would make her the world government's public enemy #1. But before the Sorbet Princess can make the call on what to do or Vegapunk can respond to her demands, the whole situation is taken out of her hands. As it turns out, the Doctor was not bluffing about the saber being defective. It might be a workable weapon, but the beam attracts an enormous swarm of bugs. Bonney only held the saber on for a few seconds before, but now, a gigantic buzzing mass of insects descends on her like some biblical plague. Bonney tries to swat at the insects with the beam, but it is useless. In less than a second, she has fainted, frothing at the mouth in sheer fright at what she went through. Vegapunk has unintentionally defeated Bonney without even striking a blow, thanks to his kooky design sense. Luffy, ever oblivious, tries to share his discovery of a rare giant stag beetle with Bonney. Meanwhile, Chopper has to point out that the other captain is in no state to appreciate Luffy's new friend. She is very clearly unconscious. Vegapunk, meanwhile, has caught up with the situation. He has put 2 and 2 together, realizing why Bonney wants him dead. The whole turned her dad into a cybernetic war machine thing. The old man slumps down on a pile of junk. He's lost that manic energy for once, the guilt catching up with him. Vegapunk dourly knows that it is ironic that one of his failures saved him. That thought makes him remember something he had meant to ask the Straw Hats. He knows they were recently in Wano. Vegapunk is curious about rumors of a dragon just like Kaido recently appearing. He asks the trio if they know anything about this mysterious figure. Luffy immediately identifies the dragon as Momonosuke. After all, he's not going to hide stuff unless he has to, and even then he's not a very good liar. Vegapunk muses that this Momo must have eaten the defective fruit he had left behind on Punk Hazard. Luffy doesn't know what he meant by that. The Doctor explains that Momo's fruit was artificial and a major project of his. He had spent 20 years and a ton of money on it, researching Kaido's lineage factor to replicate his powers. However, as far as Vegapunk is concerned, he never quite got it right. Luffy doesn't know what he could mean by that. As far as he's concerned, Momo's fruit is awesome. He is super strong, can breathe fire, and now he is even the guardian deity of Wano. He helped save the flower capital and everything. Vegapunk's creation couldn't have been any more of a success. To all this, the old man glumly asks what color the dragon is. Luffy innocently admits that it is pink. This is enough to get Vegapunk pounding his head against the ground in frustration. To him, minor cosmetic defects mean that the Devil Fruit project was a monumental failure. Luffy is confused by the Doctor's reaction. He doesn't get what's wrong with a cool dragon being pink. Jinbei, however, can follow this. Vegapunk is not only a genius, he is a perfectionist. Even a little error is enough to make him write off a project. Looking for a way to cheer the old man up, Luffy gestures to the giant robot. Vegapunk has to have built it too, right? He should make it move. That would be fun. The old Applehead clarifies, however, that he did not make the massive mech. This enormous contraption is the legendary Iron Giant that attacked Mary Joa over 200 years ago. He adds that it was built 900 years ago, further staggering his guests. Theorizing about this old machine has managed to cheer Vegapunk up some. The master scientist loves to talk shop. He explains that the attack on Mary Joa was something of an in-name only event. It climbed up the red line just fine, but the giant ran out of fuel before it could inflict any casualties on the holy city. Vegapunk muses that the scientists from 200 years ago did not have his knowledge of ancient technology. To them, this must have seemed entirely bizarre. They had no idea where the robot came from or what it had been trying to do. Still, they must have been curious. That is why they hid the mech on Egghead Island rather than letting the world government destroy it. Realizing where they are, Vegapunk congratulates the Straw Hats on finding this hidden location full of technology. Apparently, the scrapyard is hidden behind a hologram. The path here should look like a wall when seen from the town. Luffy and Chopper admit that they didn't really find this place. They just stumbled around while old and senile under the effects of Bonney's fruit. Vegapunk sounds a bit disappointed to learn that, but before we see any more of this group's misadventures, the focus shifts back to the rest of the Straw Hat crew. Shaka has brought the group into the central control room Lilith, Edison, and Pythagoras were using, and has given the crew a glimpse of the Iron Giant. He has shared the explanation with them, and the pirates are struggling to come to grips with this history even now. Robin notes that this giant's attack roughly coincides with the point where the world government finally granted fishmen basic civil rights. The two things happening at the same time is suggestive. Frankie is more impressed that this robot somehow managed to climb the red line. Shaka doesn't quite confirm that it did, merely noting that it is the most likely conclusion from what they know. The logical punk explains that he designed the Vega Force 1 based on the ancient robot, but some aspects of it even he couldn't recreate. He is still staggered by the idea that something so advanced was made 900 years ago. Frankie is incredulous at the idea that Vegapunk, the man who made all this amazing technology, could not work out some part of the old bot's construction. Shaka clarifies that he is talking about the device's power source. Something from the past was capable of outputting energy in a way they still cannot recreate. Some powerful force of energy generation, like a sun, for example. The other Straw Hats are less invested in the science, however. They are just happy to see that their captain and friends have made it through. Still, Nami is not exactly sure who the woman that is accompanying the group is. Usopp clarifies that this is Jewelry Bonney, pirate and member of the worst generation. Sanji is confused at how her age has suddenly shifted. The entire situation is still crazy, even before you get to the whole brain in a jar-based internet system. While the Straw Hats are trying to make sense of everything, we come back to Luffy's group. Vegapunk is still okay, but he is a bit down over what happened with Bonney. He admits that he did something terrible to the Sorbet Princess, though he does not clarify exactly what. Oda is continuing to tease us over what exactly went down between Vegapunk and Kuma. Luffy, remembering a bit of what Bonney said earlier, goes along with the old man's self-deprecation. He jabs a finger at Vegapunk, calling the old doctor to bow down and beg Bonney to forgive him. Even the Applehead can tell that Luffy doesn't really know what he's talking about, just that Bonney was mad at him. Still, Vegapunk agrees with the principle. Looking down, the scientist notes that there's something he has to give to Bonney. It's hard to say what could possibly make up for Kuma's cyborg surgery though. A final message from her father perhaps. Either way, the scientist turns his attention for the moment away from Bonney and back to Luffy. Vegapunk muses that the Straw Hat captain coming here might be fate. Furthermore, he has a request of Dragon's Son. Could Luffy take Vegapunk away from Egghead Island? It's not clear if that just means the original body, all 7 Vegapunks, or even Punk Records itself. I imagine it would be hard to fit that enormous brain aboard the Sunny. But before we see Luffy's response to that request, we cut over to the seas near Egghead. Cypher Pole's ship is progressing past an unruly set of sea beasts. They are broadcasting over Denden Mushi, requesting permission to dock at Egghead's port. Aboard their vessel, we see that the agents of the world government are here in force. There is a full division of rank and file armsmen with rifles here to back up the CP0 agents. Stussy, Kaku, and Lucci are all ready for the fight, now wearing their CP0 masks. Even Hattori is now sporting some adorable little face gear. Matching Lucci, of course. Stussy has a new report to share with the others. She has just heard that Jewelry Bonney was seen en route to Egghead Island. Lucci sounds annoyed just from hearing her name. He notes that Bonney has been an annoyance for CP0 for a while. As far as Lucci is concerned, she has served her purpose. They can just kill her as soon as they find her. Egghead already has a visual on their ship, likely thanks to the sea beasts. They are mechanized creatures. Vegapunk having implanted cameras in their eyes makes sense. Pythagoras is already starting to freak out at the sight of this government ship. He worries what might happen if the Navy found out that the Vegapunks are harboring pirates. Edison wonders what Cypher Pole Zero might want with them and why they have sent Rob Lucci. Lilith immediately suggests handing the Straw Hats over to the world government. Her cold-blooded streak comes in full force. Still, it is hard to blame her for not wanting to get on Lucci's bad side. She, unlike her fellow punks, remembered that he is an assassin, and it is pretty easy to guess why an assassin has showed up to this remote island. Now that they have heard who they're dealing with, the Straw Hats start to join Pythagoras in fear. They can remember how things went down on Enies Lobby, and no one's eager for a rematch with Cypher Pole. Usopp desperately asks Shaka to give them their legs back, while Nami screams that the Vegapunks can't let him in. Sanji is keeping it together, just telling Robin that he will keep her safe no matter how many times Lucci comes back. Frankie and Robin can't comment for now, but they look tense. As far as they have come from that island, the Jaguar Man remains an intimidating threat. Shaka makes a decision quickly and calmly. He orders Pythagoras to tell Cypher Pole to just drop off the Seraphim and leave. They are declining the ship's request to dock. Shaka can guess the world government won't take this well, so he tells his fellow Vegapunks to get ready for battle. If CP0 wants to try and complete their mission, they're going to have to fight their way through all of Egghead's defenses. That should be one hell of a tall order with how much technology we have seen the Vegapunks put together. And those defenses may very well include one element no one was expecting. Over in Kamabaka Kingdom, the Revolutionary Army cries out in alarm. Something strange is going on with Bartholomew Kuma. Lindbergh tries to reason with the cyborg, yelling at him that they are just trying to fix him. Kuma is not listening, however. He's getting to his feet and is starting to run. Koala yells at him that he is not in any state to be moving, even as Kuma drags a ton of medical equipment behind him. The one-time warlord almost immediately proves her right, falling to the ground head first. Still, Kuma brings himself right back to his feet. He is not deterred. The big guy is struggling to breathe, but keeps on going. He is determined to reach the sea, even as Dragon and Ivankov call out, asking their friend to explain what he is trying to do. And it is with Kuma's dash for freedom that we end the chapter. It seems pretty clear that his pacifistic programming is drawing him to Egghead. But will he be able to bring the other members of the Revolutionary Army with him? And why run, when with his Devil Fruit he can kind of pseudo-teleport anywhere he wants? What will CP0 do now that the Vegapunks are ready for a fight? And what does Old Man Vegapunk want Luffy to take away from Egghead? Let us know your thoughts to everything in the comments down below. As always, I'm Slice of Otaku. Thank you all so much for watching and have an awesome day. I love you.